Don't let the idea of inserting files intimidate you. This lesson shows you exactly how it works start to finish, explains why we take the steps we take, and sends you out into the world with templates so you can easily insert them yourself. There are a couple of niche topics that stem from inserting files, which are tackled in their own supporting lessons. The first lesson explains why Salesforce replaced the old attachments functionality with files, and the second lesson shows you what to do when you receive files that are nested in subfolders. For now, though, let's make sure you know the core 4 elements of successfully inserting files. Number 1, set the data loader to a batch size of 1. 2, prepare a mapping file that tells data loader where the files are located. 3, insert the files into the ContentVersion object. I'd call out 3A as the option to associate a parent record ID during the insert, which means you'd include a value for it in your file and map it to the first published location ID field during insert, because step 4 is linking the files to records, which you'll do by creating a second map after the ContentVersion insert is successful, and then insert new records into the ContentDocumentLink object. This is what connects files to other records. Since Salesforce Content does more than just store files, let's take a quick minute to understand how it all works. When we upload a new file, we're creating a record in the ContentVersion object. This is where the actual file is stored. Salesforce creates a content document record automatically. It links all versions of the file. You don't need to manually create or insert into the content document object. The content document link is also created if you mapped in the first published location ID field during the file insert. This links the file to another record, like an account, opportunity, etc. If you omit first published location ID, the file is uploaded to your private files and can be linked later using the content document link object. Let's get started creating our mapping file. Just like on other objects, we start by locating the source orgs file containing the list of records we want to insert. Not all databases call their files files. Look for a subfolder within the export. If it looks like it contains attached files, take note of the folder's name. Maybe it's documents, maybe it's attachments, maybe it's files. You'll then look for the CSV file within the export that contains the list of every attached file's name and information. This is what you'll create your map from. If you're doing a Salesforce to Salesforce migration, navigate to the source database and order a full backup, and check the box to include Salesforce files and Salesforce CRM content document versions. When you receive the export folder, look for the content version subfolder and the CSV named content version. Do a save as on the content version CSV, save it as an Excel workbook, and give it a name like content version workbook. The next step is to filter the records to only include rows where content URL equals blank, so you're not including any non-file records in your dataset. If the source org uses versions, make sure you also filter for is latest equals 1, which means true. Copy the filtered data and paste it into a new tab of your workbook. Now you need to locate the folder or folders that contain the actual files and download them onto your hard drive for a smooth loading experience. In a Salesforce data export, a zip archive maxes out at about 512 meg. So when the contents are going to exceed that, an additional zip archive containing an additional folder is generated. When this happens, you need to move all of the files out of these additional folders and place them into a single folder. This ensures your path to the files can be the same for all files. Now we need to locate the path to the files folder. Navigate to the folder that contains the files and right-click on one of the files to see Get Info. When the document's information page pops up, double-click on the text by where and click Copy as Path Name. As you can tell, I'm a Mac user. When files are sitting in a folder on iCloud, I get path errors, so I make sure to put them on the hard drive. Notice in the screenshot how the documents in the folder on the left are in iCloud compared to the folder on the right, which is on the hard drive. The path looks a little bit different on a PC. Notice a PC uses backslashes compared to the Mac's use of forward slashes. To grab the folder path, right-click on the folder, hold down the Shift key, right-click on the folder, and click Copy as Path. Now that you've located the path to the folder of the attached files, you can paste it into your workbook. Insert a new column into the map and paste in the path, and name the header something like My Path. Place an X in front of the header name so it won't be auto-mapped in data loader. And to save yourself a step later in concatenating, add a forward slash at the end of the path for a Mac and add a backward slash at the end of the path on a PC. Now we have the information we need to support inserting files. We just have to format it per Salesforce's requirements. We'll start with creating a new column named Version Data, which tells Salesforce where each file is located on our machine. In a Salesforce to Salesforce migration, the file names are the content version ID. Look in the files folder and validate the file names so you can create the version data values in the map. For example, if the files are in a folder on your desktop named content version, you will create a version data field in the map that concatenates the local path with the file name. This will be the complete path to each file. Here's what the concatenation formula looks like. After you drag it all the way to the bottom, copy and paste the column values to remove the formula. The next field we have to create is called Path on Client. When we include the file type in the Path on Client field, we get to take advantage of Salesforce's native file preview functionality from a records-related files list. In your map, insert a new column and name it Path on Client. Concatenate the version data and the file type separated by a period. Copy and paste the column to remove the formula. Now you have version data and path on client prepared for loading. Some databases don't have a dedicated column with file type, so you'll need to use Excel to pull it out of another field. In the attached workbook, there is the formula you need if you use 365, and there's another formula if you use an older version. Your map should now have these fields mapped and prepped. Title, which is the actual file name, description, which is optional, and version data and path on client, which are both required. Optionally, you can map in the owner ID, created by user, created date, and an associated record via the first published location ID field. There are two ways we can populate the created by and owner ID user lookup fields. One, use a VLOOKUP in Excel and bring the target org's Salesforce user IDs into the mapping file. Option 2 is to set step 2b in data loader to reference the legacy IDs you loaded into the user object. If your source data only references one object, like accounts, you can use step 2b in data loader to reference the legacy ID on a single object. If your source data references more than one object, you'll want to use a VLOOKUP in Excel to pull in the target org's record IDs. When files need to be associated to more than one record, you can create these associations by inserting content document links, which you can only do after you've completed the initial file insert into ContentVersion. Now that your map is ready and you're itching to insert those files, let's pause and cover a few best practices. First, have you created a legacy ID field on the ContentVersion object? If not, add one now and make sure your mapping file maps the source org ID to this legacy ID field. Number 2, open your data loader settings and set the batch size to 1. Third, copy the first few rows from your mapping file and create a test map. Doing a practice insert helps you be alerted of any issues that need to be solved before you start loading. Now we're going to jump into a screen share and walk through the process step by step. If you're doing a Salesforce to Salesforce migration, make sure that in the source org, when you do a data backup, you will include Salesforce files and CRM content document versions. When the backup is ready, it will include a folder called ContentVersion, which includes all the files, and it will also include a file called ContentVersion. This is the information that you're going to use to create your map. In our backup, we're going to pull our folder full of attachments and put it onto our desktop, and then we'll take the raw data from our list of attachments file, which in a Salesforce to Salesforce migration is ContentVersion, and I've placed it here in our workbook in sheet 1. The first thing we need to do is figure out the path to each file on our computer. So I'll click X and write path, and then head over to the ContentVersion folder, right click on one of the attachments and click Get Info. And from here, I can see the full path, which I'll copy and paste into that new path column. And because I'm on a Mac, I'll put a / at the end. If I was on a PC, I would put a / on the end. Now I'll drag that down to the bottom of that column, and now we know our local path. Secondly, we'll verify that the file names inside of our file folder match up with the IDs that we see in our workbook file. Here we can see that they start with 068, so we're confident that they match. What we need to do now is create our version data. So I'll insert a new column, type version data, and I'm going to use concatenate to combine the local path with the ID, which is the file name. When I drag this down, I will now copy and hit paste special values. That removes the formula, and I have my version data information complete. My next task is to create path on client. So I'll insert another column, title it path on client, and look in my file to see if I have a file type field. I do, so for ease of use, I'm going to cut that and then pull it over next to my version data. Now I will use concatenate again, and I'm going to concatenate the version data with a period and then the file type. Notice that my file type here does not include a dot before the file type. That's why I have to make sure I include that in my concatenation formula. I'll double click that down and then again copy and paste special values so that I remove the formula, and I've now created my version data and my path on client. So my mapping file is getting closer to being ready. I will go through and mark all of the fields that I don't want to map with an X so that way I don't auto map them in the data loader. I do want to make sure that I include title because it is required, and if I wish I can also bring over owner ID and created by ID and created date. I'm more interested in bringing in the first published location ID. That way I don't have to do a second load with my content document links. However, I can see that the source data references a bunch of different objects, so I won't be able to use data loader's step 2b in order to reference their legacy IDs. I proceed with inserting the files first, getting the success IDs, and then creating the content document links. Now we're in data loader searching for ContentVersion. We've got our prepped file ready to go, and we will browse our computer for it. Once we've located it, we add it, and then make sure that we have all of our fields auto-mapped and that they look good. From here, we set our output folder and proceed. Now we have our 2 successful inserts, and we can create our content document links. Here's our success file from inserting into ContentVersion. Unfortunately, we can't use the ContentVersion ID when we insert into ContentDocumentLink. Salesforce creates a corresponding content document ID for each ContentVersion success. So what we are going to do is head over into Data Loader, click Export and Show All Objects, and we're going to search for Content Document. We only need 2 fields, so I'll search for ID and select ID and latest published version ID. We'll finish our export and then pull up that file, and we're going to do a quick VLOOKUp. I've pulled our success files from ContentVersion into a new file called CDL, which is for Content Document Link. We need to find the Content Document ID related to each of these ContentVersion IDs. I've already done the work for pulling in the Salesforce ID in the target org relating back to the legacy related record ID. If we pull up our extract from Content Document, we can see the ContentVersion ID is now on the left and the content document that corresponds is on the right. So we'll do a quick VLOOKUp and pull that information into our prepped file. Now that we have our content document IDs and we have our linked entity IDs, which is the target org's related record IDs, we are ready to save our prepped file and insert into Content Document Link. We do not need to have a batch size of 1, so I did change the settings back to 200. We can see that our 2 fields are mapped. We'll click Next, choose our output folder, and insert. We have 2 successful inserts and 0 errors. If we want to check our work, we can select one of our linked entity IDs, navigate over into Salesforce, head to the record, and double check that our files are in fact attached. Up next, we will be inserting notes and explaining the difference between the old notes functionality and content notes.